Welcome to Conscious Conversations. I am Ariana.
And I'm Cami. It's in our hearts to expand your mind and reality
and elevate the consciousness of the world,
one conversation at a time. Hello and welcome to Conscious Conversations with Ariana and Cami. This is episode 4, where we explore the clairs and how they show up for us, because they show up for everybody differently. And I know that people are always asking me, like, how does this work for you? Right. And so we would love to have an open discussion about how the clairs have showed up for us and which ones do we consider our strong suits and how we experience each of them.
Yeah. And hey, what are the clairs anyways, for those that are just popping on here and don't really know what we're talking about? The clairs are your intuitive or psychic senses. So just as with the physical body, we smell, we see, we taste, we hear, we touch, we feel, we know. We also have intuitive abilities with all of those senses, and we call those the clair. We call those the clairs.
Mm-hmm. So clear feelings, right? So clear seeing, clear hearing, clear tasting, clear smelling, clear intellect. Did I cover it? Mostly.
One way, that's one way of saying it, but I mean, I clearly see with my eyeballs, except, I have glasses. So is it intuitive seeing or is it psychic seeing?
Or is it a really good eyeglass prescription?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I don't have glasses for the third eye though.
That is true. I've seen some, and I want to get their pair of sunglasses where they have the eyes, and then they've got another one for the third eye. And I thought that they were absolutely fantastic. All right. So we're really just delving into how do these gifts, I'll call them gifts. Mm-hmm. They can be really confusing for people when they first start showing up, for sure, I imagine. Like how do they show up for you? Let's start with clairvoyance. I think that's kind of, usually the one that people target the first. They'll say, "Oh, I'm a clairvoyant, a psychic clairvoyant, or whatever." How does that show up for you?
Yeah, I think clairvoyant is the most common one because we consider that like being able to see ghosts and being able to see things that aren't there. And I feel like the common people that are still that don't know a lot about what's going on in the metaphysical world understand clairvoyance. How does that show up for me? Clairvoyance is not my strong psychic ability. And I think it's important as we begin this talk to kind of say that with the intuitive senses, especially as they're just starting to emerge or as you're just starting to realize, hey, that feeling in my stomach is actually part of my intuition. There are certain senses that you'll be stronger at, particularly in the beginning. And they can be developed more and more as you go. So you may not be strong in clairvoyance, which it's not my primary. I have seen ghosts and have gotten really, really excited. I have some really interesting stories about that. The way it shows up for me, it's very rare for me to see in my mind's eye. So there's two ways to have clairvoyance. Sometimes you're seeing something in your mind's eye, and sometimes you have your eyes open and you see stuff out there that's not there. And that's how clairvoyance shows up for me. So it's really rare. I saw a cute little Asian girl floating above me while I was lying in bed one night. That was really cool. I dated a guy who liked to dabble in the dark arts, and he turned into a demon with glowing red eyes one night. That was not fun. and I was walking through a graveyard at sunset where I turned and I saw a woman in very much like period dress with the big poofy sleeves and the big bustle to make her butt really look big and the long drapey dress walking through the cemetery. And when I turned to said dark energied boyfriend who dabbled, hey, look at that, do you see that? She was gone, but I clearly saw her walking for like 6 feet, and it was really kind of cool.
That is kind of cool. I haven't had a lot of those experiences. I've definitely had them, and it's usually out of the corner of my eye. I'll sort of spot, a shadow or something. I don't know how I would respond to it as much as maybe I feel like I've asked for it on some level. The, apparitions, like, something like right there in front of me, that might feel more tangible to me if it occurred that way. More often than not, it's something that's in my mind's eye. And it'll show up in, like if I'm in a session with somebody and, a relative that isn't present anymore will show up and show me certain things. And is it clear as it is with my physical eyes? I'd say no. And I'm only given bits and pieces. I say that I'm only given what I'm supposed to see or what I'm supposed to know. So I'll get flashes. Like with the Akashics, I'll get flashes of scenes that'll have just enough information to like kind of grab onto it and share with somebody, is this meaningful to you in some way? And I'll describe, I am shown other things, like words will flash. And so I'll see a word flash in my mind's eye and it'll blink at me. And it's usually an important word, right? Somehow. And so I'll share that. Sometimes I can definitely see auras when I choose to see auras. It's not something that happens involuntarily too much, every now and then. Right. But usually I'll just say, all right, I'd like to see the aura. Please show me the aura. Right. And then I can see it and I can see blockages and I can see whatever it is that I need to see. And I feel like I feel like it's like that for a lot of things where I've learned to sort of turn the tap off. Right. So that I'm not overly affected by things 24/7. Otherwise, I've got way too much information to deal with, and I can't really function in my everyday life. So most of the clairvoyance shows up in my mind's eye, not so much directly with my physical eyes. So yeah, I've had a few experiences, but not too many. And again, in pondering that, I'm not really sure how I would feel about that if that were happening all the time, because I'm aware of presences around all the time and I really don't want to see them all the time. Thank you very much. And I know that some people are incredibly, incredibly gifted clairvoyants, and when I'm around them, my clairvoyance amplifies tremendously. So that's that one for me. So in thinking back, do you feel like maybe some of the experiences that you have had, were they trying to communicate with you in some way and trying to convey a message? Or do you think it was random? Do you think it was who you were hanging out with at the time? And maybe you were picking up, some of their gifts?
Well, that's starting to go a little bit deeper with some things. Said dark energy boyfriend at the time. I had done our composite astrology charts, and there is actually I forget what it was, but there is a configuration between my planet, one of my planets, and his planet that actually, when I did the research of what it meant, he amplifies me. This particular planetary configuration creates an amplification of those abilities. So all of those experiences, he was in the vicinity. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say something dealing with Neptune is a high probability. Some sort of Neptune aspect with another one of your planets would amplify spiritual gifts and occurrences of supernatural type things.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Yeah.
Because it was
That's a guess.
Thank God he's long gone. So
yes. And thankfully we can have those experiences with other people who are not toxic.
Yeah. And so the cool thing about that, just to kind of share with our listeners, is what that did was it showed me that I was capable of doing it and can hone it or work it out like a muscle if I so choose. But for me, I do so much dark entity work that I don't necessarily know that I need to see what some of these demons look like that I'm clearing. It's much more cute for me, since I really, I wouldn't consider myself like a dark person or in that way. I really am more, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that it would serve me to be able to see them outside of myself, attached to the person I'm trying to work on and glaring at me, like the one that came out of said boyfriend, because that was a little scary.
It's intimidating, and it can put you in a different space, and you may not be as effective, right?
Yeah, I love
yeah,
they're super fun. So I would not want to be deterred from it in any way. So it's not necessary for me.
I love that you're talking about this like that. I know, I really, really do. We've had some discussions around that, and it is one of our topics that we will definitely explore with entity work. Yeah. And how that shows up for us. Ariana is very skilled at this. I would say that I've definitely done plenty of it. It is not my favorite work, and I get I get certain feelings about it. So really, if it's something that I'm going to delve into, I really need to shift and reframe that. And so I look forward to speaking further with you on this, because I definitely, there's a skill there, right? I can do it. I just really prefer not to. So or I could just send them to you.
It's like, for me, it's like I'm laughing at myself, because for me, it's like ignorance is bliss. So like, as long as I'm ignorant to what it actually looks like, and I just know it's there, and I know I can clear it, and I know it's going to go away, and my client's going to be like, whoa, I felt that and I feel better. That's all awesome. So yeah, I think if I were privy to really being visually able to see it, I don't think that would serve what I do.
I agree. Yeah, I've had some experiences with it where maybe I was learning and I wasn't really clean about my practices, and had some disruption in my own life. So we learn our lessons, don't we? We learn our lessons. Yeah. So I deal with things very, very differently now, and knock on wood, we're all good. Okay, so that was clairvoyance. Do we want to say anything more about clairvoyance?
No, I could talk about entities all day. That'll be.
I know. Yeah. We're definitely that is definitely on the list. In fact, we were going to do that one today, but then we shifted gears and went down another road and decided to focus on this. So do expect that conversation for another day.
Clear audience.
Clear audience.
Yeah, hearing.
How does that, do you want me to go first and how that shows up for me?
You can.
I feel like that one has probably been my strongest suit most of my life. So the other ones I've really, really had to work on, but there are a couple that just were automatic and really lifelong companions. So I will have, but they've definitely evolved. So with the clairaudience, it could show up as sort of mediumship type abilities. questionably it can involve channeling, because I will essentially hear a conversation going on, and I will narrate what the dialogue that is going on. So that could be with, ancestors or other beings that happen to be present, in this realm, but maybe not visible, or other aspects, or higher self. Higher self is some of my favorite stuff, where I, basically tap into the person's higher self, and we have a dialogue. So they ask questions, and there's a conversation that happens, and it's very, very wise and loving. This the voice almost universally with the higher selves, but it is me hearing a conversation, and often enough, also there is there are things that come through where I'm told to say this, right? I'll be hearing things, somebody whispering, and I don't even know who it is. So it may be, a guide or whatever, I don't even know. But that has been present, but the actual dialogue and being able to actually use the gift, rather than being like, what is this? I'm confused. I don't know what I'm hearing, right? To have worked with it for so long now, it's just kind of like a part of me. And I don't know what life would be like without it. I'm so grateful for it. I don't, it really literally guides my everyday life. Okay, what are we doing next? Okay, what are we doing next? All right, what are we doing next? Right. And when I'm in that mode, I'm in the flow, and magic happens. Right. So without that guidance, we've had discussions around the dark night of the soul. Those were times where I felt like I did not have that connection. It wasn't there. I wasn't hearing the guidance. I wasn't hearing the different messages from different places. I felt completely lost. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt very, very alone without that.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you've experienced your own color of dark night of the soul. This went on it was a few years, right? And you hear of some people being like, I couldn't get out of bed. I wasn't like that, but I was definitely on zombie mode. And I was just putting one foot in front of the other because I felt I didn't have a choice. I'm a single mom. I had to keep going. So I had to.
Right.
I didn't feel like I had a choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a whole other topic. But the clairaudience it's my constant companion. So I I really prefer life with it rather than without it. And it shows up in lots and lots of different ways, but it's all like an inner hearing. That's something where I can differentiate, right? If it is, I'm not like hearing a booming voice necessarily outside of me, or hearing things necessarily with my physical ears. It's something that I'm like hearing in my inner ears. And I don't know how to explain that. How do you explain that to somebody when there's conversations going on that you can hear, but it's not with your ears?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So clairaudience is another interesting one for me, where I don't know, do I hear things, or do I know it? Right. So the next one we're going to talk about is claircognizance, and I'm grazing over it because it's such a big part of me. It's it's one of my top two abilities. And so is it that within my inner mind or inner ear, I'm hearing words, or is it that I know? What's the difference between those two things? And that's really interesting for me. So I don't put a lot of weight on whether or not it's claircognizance or clairaudience. I just accept the information and move on. Share it or not share it, whatever I'm supposed to do with it. I have, I guess, a couple of things I really want to share with the listeners is that actively with attempting clairaudience or whatever, actively asking questions is not at the top of my list of activities in my world. I just kind of flow through life. And for better or for worse, so sort of end up wherever I end up and might benefit more from those conversations. And that's something that I've been working on more and more lately is asking, listening. And, in some belief systems, meditation is a form of clairaudience, right?
I could see that.
So there's a saying, we pray to talk to God and, and then we listen for the answer, which is meditation.
Okay. I'll take that. The difference with clairaudience and claircognizance for me, and again, it doesn't really matter. Does it really matter? I mean, we're just sharing how we experience things, really. And we've talked about this before. Humans are meaning-making machines, and we apply a lot of weight to labels. And when we feel like, oh, that's what that means. Well, what if it doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, really. But for me, the difference between how claircognizance and clairaudience show up for me is where there's like a dialogue, or I hear it in my inner ear versus it just drops in. Claircognizance, like I don't have a recollection of hearing it before I speak it. I just know it and speak it. If that makes sense.
Okay, that's interesting. And perhaps I am more like, what is that real? Question, doubting, not questioning, but doubting. What was that? A couple of things that I kind of pop in for me to share are, as you're learning to work with clairaudience, one of the techniques that I have used that as we're talking, I'm like, oh, that could be part of clairaudience. So there's a journaling technique where you can ask a question and then just let the pen move across the paper as to whatever the answer is. And there's an element of clairaudience or claircognizance with that. Just writing those words, automatic writing. There's something in that is going through the mind or in some way. And I want to share a really cute story. I feel like this is another topic that this can spin off into another whole topic for us. How to encourage your child's abilities.
Yeah.
One day when my kids were young, maybe 7 and 8 years old, something popped into my head while we were getting ready to go to school. And I put something in a little box and I closed the box up tight, and they were still eating their breakfast. So I sat it down between them while they were eating their breakfast. And I said, okay, you guys, we don't have a lot of time because we got to get in the car. There's no right or wrong answer. This is just for fun. It's just a game. Close your eyes for a minute and just see if you can sense or know or hear or feel what's in the box. And my older son wanted to be right. He wanted to win. And he was just like bullets coming out of his mouth, all these different guesses, putting no time, no thought. He just wanted to get it right. It was very cute. My younger son was very quiet. And I finally turned to him and I said, what do you think, babe? And he goes, Mommy, so cute. Mommy, why am I hearing the word socks? And I was like, you're hearing socks. He goes, yeah, I keep hearing the word socks. And I'm like, that's great. That's what's in the box. I had balled up a couple pairs of socks and I put it in this box. It was the only answer he asked me. That was his only response. And I said, oh my God, you guys, Austin, how long have you been able to do this? And Vegas, my other son, says he does it all the time, Mom. And this is all epiphany for me, right? I have no idea. He goes, every time I'm thinking about a song in my head, he starts singing it and he makes me crazy.
And I love that.
I'm like, oh my God, I never knew this. And so then from there, I started to encourage Austin to use these voices more. It was really a warm and charming time. He's now a teenager and he tells me that all of that was lying and nonsense and he was making it up and it didn't really happen.
Oh,
that's okay.
And then they have their phases and it's all okay. And you know that it happened. And I mean, because how else would he know? Right. But the fact that Vegas said he does it all the time. And that reminded me of a story that I'd like to share. It's kind of an ongoing thing, to be honest with you. So when my daughter was little, it took her a while to be verbal. She was 3 months premature. She was extraordinarily tiny. She was a super preemie. And I would be so frustrated. Like we used sign language with her. And that definitely helped. But there were certain things where I knew she wanted things. And I remember one time where it's like, what are you wanting? I don't understand. And a picture of a package of dates flashed in my mind. And I was like, these? I went and got them and gave them to her. And that is what she wanted. So from that point on, when she was frustrated, she would send me pictures of what she wanted. And we would practice with this. We would send each other pictures in our minds. And so we would communicate telepathically in that way. And our telepathy crosses beyond just the pictures as well. There is, and that's some of the stuff that I was reminded of with your story. There are a lot of times where I think things about a situation or person or whatever, and speaking it would not be the kindest thing. And here it pops out of her mouth. So that happens all the time. And I have to be really, really, really careful because she literally will speak my thoughts. So I have learned to, bite my tongue more often than not, especially in certain situations, especially if I'm, thinking something that really isn't very kind, right? Even if it's true, she will just speak it. And so I've had to learn to sort of really shift my thoughts and be aware of my thoughts. It's made me a lot more aware so that I'm not projecting those out so loudly that she's able to hear them. But obviously, we all use our gifts a little bit differently, but yeah, that's another one where, yeah, I think she definitely is clairaudient as well.
Love that story. I love that. Oh, I'm excited to do that kid podcast now. That's
Ooh, yeah, that is another one that's on our list. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been an adventure.
It has been.
So do you want to talk about claircognizance?
Yeah, let's talk about claircognizance. So claircognizance, I refer to as I know and I don't know how I know. And that seems to be a pretty basic description of claircognizance for me. And to me, it's one of the most difficult intuitive or psychic abilities to discern because the knowing doesn't happen the way you describe it. For me, Cami, you make it sound like it's a big drop in. So you have this awareness of this drop in, and for me, it's just like I have this thought that sort of it's more like it goes from like dust or an apparition into this solidification in my mind. So it just sort of kind of sprinkles and sparkles into a solidification and comes out of nowhere. It's a little softer. And it's like, did I know this? Did I hear it? Did I see it? And sometimes I don't even know how to describe it to a client if it's something concerning them. And again, so for me, I don't worry too much about what clair it's coming from or what verbiage I use. I usually just say I'm getting X and such rather than I'm hearing or I'm seeing or I'm knowing. And does that mean anything to you? And that way I can sort of dance around the fact that I don't necessarily know if I'm hearing it or if I'm seeing it in my mind's eye or if I'm knowing it. It's what I'm getting. And that seems to be enough, really. The other aspect to me for claircognizance is I may be speaking to someone and all of a sudden this wisdom just kind of starts coming out of my mouth and I don't even know what I'm saying. It's just this, it's like wisdom channeling through my mind, out my mouth so fast that I don't have any idea where it's coming from. And I'll typically have to say to whoever I'm speaking to, I hope you caught that because I have no idea what I just said. And it was really important.
It feels really important when it comes through, right? When that happens, it's like there's an urgency there, right? And it's not as if like somebody or something is like taking over us and you know, using our mouths or anything. It's not like that. It's just, we find and allow a wisdom passing through, and there's such a love there more often than not, at least for me, because I've definitely had that experience. So the claircognizance shows up in a few different ways for me. Sometimes I will just know things and know the answers to things, and I don't know where I got the answer, right? Like I don't know where that came from. Did I read it in a book somewhere? Did I've never read anything about this. How would I know anything about this? And I just know it, and I don't know how I know it. And so I do experience some of that. I also experience there's different terms for that, with the, I've heard it referenced as dumb channeling, where people will just start to speak things that are really pretty profound, right? But they don't know where it's coming from. I don't like the term. I'll say that, because every experience that I've had, the information that comes through is very profound and necessary, and helpful to
Right.
whoever is receiving it, right?
I would just call that channeling. I don't understand the dumb aspect.
It was to differentiate between if you know who it is that you're bringing through, and do you ever really,
Many channelers out there are channeling something other than what they say they're channeling or what
so
they're
many.
channeling, and they don't check in and make sure that they're actually talking to who they claim or who they think they're talking to.
And I think that's what they're talking about. I think that's kind of where the reference comes from. It's because you do have to check, make sure that you're not hijacked, make sure that you're really bringing through something that is, that feels right, because you can feel the resonance. The resonance feels off when it comes through. You can hear it, and it happens to, I would say, most channelers at some point, right? Where they'll I'll just say it's a little distorted. The frequency, the message is a little distorted, where like something got in there and it's not coming through purely anymore. But I do have that experience, and that I really enjoy those. And because it just takes, in a way, it's taking some responsibility off my shoulders, because I'm like, listen, this just needs to come through, and I'm saying it, and I won't, if you ask me about this, I won't remember tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, if this is something personal that I'm sharing that helps you in some way, then I'm super happy about that. But don't ask me about it, and you don't have to worry about me sharing your secrets because I'm not going to remember. I'm aware on that level. I'm sort of set aside, so that I'm just delivering the message, and I enjoy when that happens. And then the other way is one of the ones that you were talking about where the package drops in. A lot of times I'll get sort of a headache or suddenly super tired in the middle of the day and I have to go lay down. Those don't happen very often, but when they do, it's something pretty profound. And it's when there's a major upgrade or a package that I call it a package because it drops in, and that's like a packet, like a network packet in computer terms, right? Where the data traverses over the network and then it goes to the next phase and it's sort of unwrapped and unpacked and put in a different format and then sent off again. It's kind of that sort of thing, and it drops in as a whole thing. It's not just words or sounds or sights, or it's all of it. It's the whole concept all wrapped into there. I have to then open it and translate it into words if I can, right? Because it's thoughts, feelings, emotions, sights, sounds. It's all of it, all packed into a package that drops in, and those are like I said, those are usually pretty big. That is not something that happens all the time. So is that claircognizance? I don't know if that qualifies, but
That sounds like a download. So
yeah. Yep.
yeah, I don't know.
I'd call it that.
That sounds really cool. Gosh, there was one other thing I wanted to say and it gone. Oh, back on channeling. I don't know if you've experienced this with the channeling work. I used to do a lot more channeling, not on purpose. And like you said, you can sense if it's a trickster that you're channeling or something darker. And I did not have issues with that for whatever reason. But what I wanted to share is that it was really interesting and a little surprising when it first started for me that the tempo of my speech, my voice would change. It was very, very different. I mean, it was very obvious that there was something else coming through. And it was not something that I was doing to make it sound like I was being someone else. That's sort of, that is what was happening. Although I'm sure there are people out there that are doing something else where they change their voice to make it sound like they're channeling.
There is definitely.
Go ahead.
There is definitely there are definitely some people, I'm sure we've seen them all, where there's affectation, right? And for some of them that eases out as they continue channeling over the years. Then it becomes more fluid and more closer to their normal speech patterns and things like that. But it definitely can come through like that. I'd prefer to have control. I would like to have control of my own voice modulation, right? And it can come through a little bit differently where it's just the words are different, the feeling is different that it comes through, and you can hear it. You can hear it in the vocal tones, but to totally give myself over to that level of affectation, I'm just not comfortable with that for me. Some people are wonderful with it. It works for them. I'm not comfortable with allowing that for me. It's like allowing something to kind of come in and take over my body. I can have a sense of it. I would love to, collaborate, but I don't need to give over my body. I'm not comfortable doing that. That's me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's kind of bordering into what I would consider mediumship, where they do come in to drop into the body.
I've seen that. I've definitely seen that. I mean, there are some times where I'm talking to somebody's relative and I'll start taking on their mode of speech and, hand gestures and things that I wouldn't normally do, but it's usually like they're showing me this and this is how they're behaving, but it's not as if they're in my body, if that makes sense. It's I'm not willing to let go of that control on that level. Just, I mean, I've seen some things and maybe I know myself well enough to know that it probably wouldn't be the best idea for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a student who was adept with working with entities, ghosts, probably more accurate than just saying entities. But this was someone that I had earlier, before he started training himself or taking classes or learning. I had pulled 3 demons out of him. So, I mean, he was a rageaholic until he came to me and we discovered all of these fun little demons that had been playing in his body since he was a child. And when he started to learn about mediumship and communicating with ghosts, he would say, they're trying to come in me and I don't want them in me. He was just that spongy of a person, I guess, that I had to pull all those things out. And now we've got, if somebody's grandmother wants to pop in so that she can communicate better to so-and-so, that's like a whole other level.
I feel like this may be crossing over into clairsentience and how clairsentience, people experience that. And yes, I have definitely seen that. And there are certain, I'll say thought patterns, programmings, lifestyle habits that can contribute to that sponginess, and people having those experiences, and those who really have no idea that they're picking up what they're picking up. That I've definitely had some experiences with that. And I know you have too.
And our next Claire is clairsentient on our list anyway, so we can just dive right in. That means so clairsentient is feeling things in your body that are not yours. That I think that's a nutshell. I lump that in with feeling their emotions as well.
I'm nodding in agreement, even though you can't see me.
So we talked about this. We've come across some other places where they separate the feeling someone else's emotions and feeling the physicalness. So they separate that out under clairsentient. I don't see that as necessary to do. It's a really good practice, especially if you are a sensitive, an empath. You hopefully have heard our podcast on empaths. There's a lot of great information there. But if you are an empath, then you are adept to taking on other people's emotions and feeling physical issues in your body that are not yours. And it's a great habit to start asking, is this really mine? And learning to identify. I know when I started, I would have some really intense emotions. Having 4 planets in Scorpio doesn't help that. And I had to start to really learn, where is this coming from? Is this a dark entity or demon? trying to work through me with these intense emotions? Are they from someone else that's in my vicinity that I'm picking up on? And when I work on someone on the physical realm, I may feel, a discomfort in parts of my body that are the client's body asking for help.
Absolutely. All of that. It shows up in so many different ways. And I am in agreement with you on whether it is something that you're feeling physically in your physical body or the emotions that pass through, that is all part of this clear feeling, where you're picking up things beyond your normal emotions, right? There's a lot of times where I remember where I used to live in a house, and it was a little suburban neighborhood, and I would be sitting at my desk and all of a sudden be like, man, I am really craving a cigarette and a beer right now. And I don't drink and I don't smoke. And it was somebody else, right? It wasn't even mine, but I was so craving it. I'm like, where is this even coming from? And then also being hit with waves of anxiety or anger or, certain emotions, and not really understanding where it was coming from. I don't live in a suburban neighborhood anymore. I live, on a small piece of property. So there's a little bit more space. So I don't have as much of that, but I still feel things, especially if I open up to feel it. But it can come in so many different ways. I know I was sharing with you earlier about if I do have somebody on the table and I'm working with them hands-on, I don't do much hands-on work anymore. But I will be able to sort of laser point and key in on certain areas. And even I'm not even applying any pressure, and they're saying, they're like, ow, that hurts. And then I show them somewhere else on their body, this is the level of touch that I'm applying.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're not even touching me. I'm like, I know, that's what I'm sharing. I'm not lying. They're like, it feels like you're pressing in, and then I have to back the energy out a little bit so it's not quite as intense, but then I'll start getting information from it. It'll tell me like the age that they were when this kicked off, and what was happening, the emotions that are trapped in there, and what's wanting to be released. And, I'll send it this love that I can't really describe, other than it's like this divine feminine nurturing love that is just so deep and profound, and it can literally melt the pain and not only remove the pain, but remove the blocked emotions, whatever it is that's in there, and provide some relief. So that is one of the ways that I use clairsentience. I also like to body proxy people when I'm working with them remotely. So it's not even hands-on. I'll just be having a conversation with them, and I'll start to have some sensations in my body. And I'll say, are you experiencing this, right? Or is this just me? Because I'm feeling this, and I don't think this is me. This is what I'm feeling. So certain things will sort of, I'll say that it kind of like taps at me, right? It's not like I'm overwhelmed. There are certain times where I'm working through something where something feels really intense, and I'll have a pretty vocal response to it, or like some sort of but that more often than not, I can pass things through without that. But there's just so many ways for the clairsentience to show up. And I know, like, just driving through neighborhoods, I used to practice by driving through neighborhoods and picking up information about different people in different houses and stuff like that. It wasn't like I was overtly trying to spy. I was really just trying to work on my abilities. And I've learned to do things a little bit differently now because it felt almost involuntary. Some of the information that I was getting, where it was a little bit more than I was looking to, a little bit more feedback than I was looking for. And so I've had to sort of tone that down and instead project my energy out. So I'm not picking up all of that stuff. So, what are some more of the ways that the clairsentience shows up for you?
Oh my God. I mean, have we covered all of it?
It's a big one. It's such a big one, and it can be such a tool, but it can also be debilitating for people who, if they're experiencing this, they don't know where these thoughts and feelings are coming from. I will say it's one of the first things that I work with people on. If they ask me, like, where do I start? Know what's you, know what's yours, asks, where is this coming from? Is this even mine? That is like one of the first things to start working with. And that's where you start having the relationship with yourself to determine, why am I even dealing with this? I'm feeling like really grumpy out of nowhere and it's not even mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that can get really tricky because for me, I know in my early stages of learning myself, learning my intuitive gifts, I was hell bent that it was all mine. I was determined to have ownership of everything, and especially those intense emotions. I'd find reason why I must be angry, and it felt justified and it felt righteous, and I was going to hold on to it and keep it and make it mine. And it didn't have to be. Partly it's a choice. It's a choice to claim it. If you want to, you can. And it's a choice to release it and let it go. And you may not necessarily identify who or where it actually comes from or what it's about. But particularly when it's something that's not serving you, low vibrational energies, low vibrational emotions, things that are disruptive to your relationships around you, it's probably a good idea to start exploring what is it really about. Is it yours and trauma that you have that needs to be cleaned up and resolved? Or is it something that you're picking up from somewhere else, someone else, or something else? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of the unseen that our bodies and our abilities are capable of picking up on. And particularly as the earth goes through its ascension, and we all are transforming and we are all evolving deeper and deeper into our abilities to work on identifying what is truly yours.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Yes, good summary. I love it. And there were so many things that came through as you were speaking too. And mostly I was just sitting here applauding because yes, you nailed it.
Thank you. What did you say?
I mean, it crosses over into shadow work, and that's part of it. Is this even mine, right? Well, because maybe there is, especially if it makes you feel some sort of way when somebody's frequency bumps up against yours, right? There's an alignment there somewhere. So I definitely went through a phase of radical responsibility is what I called it. That was sometime around 2009 2010, where I was going, everything in my experience is within my power, right? And that can be a very empowering experience, and it can feel rather overwhelming. And it is maybe a part of shadow work, but also determining like what's going on? What is this bumping into? And how would I even recognize it unless I had it within me or I had experienced it at some point? So really the differentiator there for me is, am I having an adverse reaction to this? Am I being triggered by this, right? Or am I just feeling it saying, oh, okay, I recognize that and okay, right? I recognize that frequency and here's kind of how we deal with it. Or is this a problem? Am I feeling all amped up over it and severely triggered? So that's where something maybe needs to be looked at, is if we're being triggered by something, then it's not neutralized, and there may be some things to look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to talk about clairgustance and clairalience?
You mean clear taste and clear smell?
Yeah, those. Oh, so funny.
Yeah, I love it. So I can't speak anything about clear taste, which is also more fancy called clairgustance. I can't recall a time that I had that experience. So do you want to share on that?
Well, and now that I'm thinking about it, the taste and smell are so linked in a way, right? Like if you have your nose plugged, you don't really taste things in the same way. So is it tasting or is it smelling that I'm experiencing? It's not something I have a lot of experience with. There are certain things that I really, really don't care to smell or taste, that maybe messages from the other side. Every once in a while I will refer to like emotions that way, or describe sensations that I'm having, like it tastes like this, right? But that's more of me being playful than anything else. As far as actually tasting things clearly, I don't know that I have a good lock on that one to be able to speak on that. I would love to have, hear from somebody else who may be able to share some, maybe somebody, who listens to the podcast can share their experience with the clear tasting. I'm going to say that I prefer not to have that one. And that is one of the reasons that I'm not experiencing it. I definitely do not play with that one and do not ask for that one to be amplified in my life. The smelling, it'll show up as like cigarettes or cigars, or like a perfume, or like a smell that you might associate with a certain person, and a lot of times I can't place it. So that one I definitely experience, and it is only usually when somebody is visiting.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It is usually not used like in like even in mediumship readings and things like that. I'm trying to think if that's ever come through where I feel like the communication is there in other ways, and like I can get a sense of that individual. The smelling doesn't come through. It's when somebody passes through my environment, or I am somewhere else and somebody is passing through, that I'll get those things. So it's usually the wanderers, the ghosties, or whatever that will elicit that clear smelling for me.
Yeah. Yeah, clear smell is fun for me. It doesn't happen a lot, but just like you said, it's typically cigarettes, cigars, flowery smells, perfume, cologne, things of that nature. All have been fairly pleasant from my experience. I mean, cigarettes are cigarettes, but and as you said, sorry, I just had a brain freeze. As you said, for me, when that happens, it's a signal for me to pay attention to whoever is trying to communicate from the other side. So it's typically I'm with someone and it's a deceased friend or deceased relative that's hanging around with that other person, and their way of signaling me is through that smell. Yeah, I had a funny story where I was at a restaurant with a friend and we were sitting at the bar, and the bar area was empty except for a table of 3 men right behind us. And my friend, who was a guy, went to the restroom. And when he came back, as he walked behind me and sat down in his chair, there was this huge gust of cigarette smoke. And I'm like, what the heck? You don't, he wasn't a smoker. I'm like, you don't smoke. was someone smoking in the bathroom? Was there cigarettes in the bathroom? And he's like, what are you talking about? And while I'm asking him, I'm sniffing his neck and his hair and his clothes. And I turn around and I kind of face the three men behind us, and I'm sniffing the air around them, and they're looking at me like I'm nuts. And I'm like, I smell something. And my friend is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I smell cigarettes. Somebody's smoking, or there's something I need to tell you, and I got to figure it out. And so I finally said, who do you know on the other side that smoked a lot of cigarettes? And he burst into tears. He's like, he was raised by somewhat abusive parents, and the only person that he felt safe with was his grandmother. When she died, it was devastating for him, and he just burst into tears. And he goes, my grandmother. And he was crying. And I said, okay, try to compose yourself. She's trying to communicate. And he'd been trying to learn to work with his own abilities. So I said, this is a great opportunity. Why don't you just close your eyes and try to connect with your grandmother and see if you can get the communication, see if you can connect to her and see what she wants to say. I'm going to let you do that so that it's a great opportunity. And he closed his eyes with tears streaming down his face. And I could see him nodding, and I could see him like smiling. And then he started to giggle, and the tears were still streaming. And after a few minutes, he opened his eyes and he turned to me and he was like, thank you. That was amazing.
That is amazing. I love it when stuff like that happens. And I haven't heard a story specifically like that, but especially being present for other people as they're witnessing their gifts and their gifts starting to come through. Oh my gosh. I just get so excited when people are starting to explore this stuff. They're starting to wake up to it. Things are starting to happen. They're like, oh my gosh, I experienced this. Right. And am I nuts, or what is this? Let's unpack it. Let's unpack it. Let's take a look at that. Right. And let's explore. It's not scary.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I think after that, he developed a very direct relationship with his grandmother, being one of his guides now. And it's really beautiful. And it is, as you say, it's such an honor to be witness to people opening up to their gifts, growing into the highest version of themselves, and even into their life's purpose as you work with them and just hold space for them and encourage them. It's amazing.
It is. Yeah, it is a massive blessing, and one of the greatest honors. And, I don't want to compare of what's better or worse. There are moments, especially with grown men, who have an experience, and we deal with something privately together, and they share some things that maybe they haven't shared ever with anybody, and have some breakthroughs and sobbing and tell me, I haven't cried in 30 years.
Yeah.
When they have experienced it, that it really rivals the people that are coming into their gifts. So that the major transformations, the major ahas, the major, I love that. I love the small stuff, but it's the big ahas and understandings and breakthroughs that, I feel so blessed to be a part of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree.
Favorite stuff.
There's one other thing that we haven't covered. And while we've been sort of doing this, I had this really interesting ping that I haven't shared with you related to it. So this will be interesting.
Hey, tell me.
What we haven't spoken about is psychometry.
Ooh.
From my point of view, and I think you agree with me that the psychometry is kind of connected to the clairsentience.
I think so. Yeah.
Some other people call it clairtangency.
Okay.
Or psychometry. But that's when you hold an object or touch an object, and you get information about the owner, or I guess you can touch a person and get information from them as well, which is where the crossover with clairsentience really occurs. But you know what hit me while I was thinking about it just now is when I'm holding an object, right? Am I getting the information from touching it? Am I getting information from claircognizance? Am I getting information from clairaudience? Am I getting information from clairvoyance? So within psychometry, there's a lot of crossover that occurs to me that I hadn't really thought about, especially where some places are saying, well, psychometry is this thing called clairtangency. Well, is it really? Or is it touching something that triggers the other clairs that you're strong in? I don't know. What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. I think because it can come from so many different places. So I'm thinking of a situation where I had some items, and there was somebody that was over, and I said, I'd really prefer not to open this box. I would like to just hand you the box and then you can tell me what you're getting from it. And he proceeded to draw a picture of what was inside the box. And I was kind of blown away because it's definitely not my strongest skill set. It's not something that I have really practiced, right? I've definitely been in houses and stuff where I'll touch the walls or I'll feel something and I'll start like hearing things or experiencing things and feeling emotions and stuff. So I pick things up in that way. I haven't practiced so much like the psi cards and like knowing what the card is on the other side and those sort of games that we play in order to practice our psi abilities, or holding on to objects and getting information about the person. I just haven't had a lot of practice with that, but you're absolutely right. It can come through in so many different ways. And for me, it may be a knowing. I may have some hearing. I feel like I definitely will question myself, or I feel like I'm put on the spot somehow. If it happens spontaneously and I just get information, or just something comes through and nobody's asking me, here, what do you get from this? Right? It feels like it dampens my abilities if I feel like I'm put on the spot in that way. And like that doesn't really happen in sessions. I don't feel stymied, but in other situations where I've had an opportunity to play around with psychometry, I've had that experience. So you're showing me some things that maybe I need to clear from my experiences so that doesn't sort of overshadow those abilities. And maybe I would be, willing to play around with that some more. It's not one that I have an awful lot of experience with.
Yeah. I in the past, I have had meetups where we'll do psychometry games, and I'll tell, if you're going to come, you have to bring an object. We put them all in on top of a table, and everybody takes someone else's object and we talk about it, or we take one object and go around the room. However we structure that. And that's been amazing to do that. And I've personally been surprised what comes through for me, because I didn't consider it to be something that I'm strong at, but apparently stronger than I'm willing to be aware of, and easily closed off so that I can function on the planet. But I do notice that I love antiques. And I'm not a huge, big fan of going to antique stores, because there's just so many different energies and so much going on. And it's like,
that can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it's massive overload.
I have actually met some antique store owners, managers, whatever, who must have some level of something, even though we don't talk about, because there's some level of clearing that they do on the items that are brought in. And it's not like they're wiped clean. They still have the imprint. I can still feel that. But I can tell that the negativity, I'll call it negativity, the heaviness, that's how it feels to me. A lot of the heaviness has been removed. So it's either where they're acquiring these, maybe it's just that, these people that they maybe acquire some pieces that have happier energy in them. You know what I'm saying? So it really depends, but I've definitely experienced something like that. And it can be like kind of like cacophonous almost going into, because you've got so many different energies at play, and from so many different places. Like if you have an estate sale, it's picking up pretty much all of the same imprint, right? And so it's all carrying a lot of the same energy. But when you have different pieces from so many different estate sales and so many different areas, it can be really, really loud. Still preferable to big cities for me, but but pretty loud. And I'm a no thank you for the most part.
I get it. Awesome.
That was really good. Yeah, we hadn't really talked too much about the psychometry and the different ways that could pop in. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Absolutely.
Are there any other clairs that are coming to mind? I think we really covered them all. I know that they can have different terms, and I am not really wanting to get into a debate as to what something is or isn't. What does it mean to you? That's really all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd certainly like to encourage our listeners, if you have any questions or your own experiences, to please share them in the comments. We love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
I think that's it. All right. Well, until next time, maybe we'll talk about entities. Maybe not. It's coming up, though. It's definitely coming up.
Maybe we'll talk about kids.
Maybe. We have a whole list of topics, and I'm so excited for these conversations to continue.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Conscious Conversations. We hope that the insights and wisdom shared here have resonated with you and sparked new pathways of growth and transformation.
We value your presence and engagement, and we invite you to be an active part of our conscious community. Your comments, questions, and shares contribute to the collective expansion of knowledge and awareness.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave a comment or share it with someone who might benefit from these transformative conversations. Together, we can create ripples of positive change.
We also offer personalized sessions and resources to support you on your journey of personal growth and spiritual healing. Visit our websites listed in the comments section to explore the various energetic healing modalities and sessions we provide.
Remember, conscious growth is a continuous journey, and we're honored to walk this path with you. Subscribe to our podcast, stay connected, and never miss an episode as we explore new dimensions of consciousness and elevate the collective vibration.
Join us next time for another enlightening episode of Conscious Conversations. Until then, keep expanding your mind and embracing the infinite possibilities that lie within.